So this is what the topic for today's is, right? Like navigating AI assistant development. I tried few of the tools as I was on the beach, and like this is from my those experiments that I did on the projects with different tools. But I'll be primarily talking about GitHub Copilot as an example today. Whenever I talk like GitHub Copilot or AI assistant, it's alternatives. Like don't take it to the word. I'll be using AI assistant or GitHub Copilot alternatively. So I think by this time I don't have to introduce like what is GenAI, but it was there since long time, right? Remember Google Translate? It generated like, for example, I'm in Vietnam, I have to translate English to Vietnam. I used to do that like 3 years back as well. Then what is that change, right? So there was this model which got introduced in 2017, which is transformer model. And there was this paper, which is attention is all you need, that introduced this model, like how you train your model basically, right? And that was the breakthrough. Along with this model, and all these things were available in the market as well, like you have GPU, TPU advancement, there was data to train from, there was commercial interest, and there was a lot of development in Python libraries as well. And I think that led to born of GPT, like large LLM, what we can say. So in this case, right, like larger is the better. So if you have heard, GPT-4 has been trained with 1 trillion parameter. So the larger the parameters are, the more capabilities it possesses, and that's why I think it is better. So remember GPT-1, I think nobody remembers it because nobody used it, because it wasn't, it didn't have that much capability as we have it today. And this was a generic purpose model, right? And later they developed, like there was an interest to develop common purpose model as well, like sorry, specific purpose models as well. When we say specific, like for example, coding assistant, right? So what you do, you take base model, and then you take the specific domain area that you want to train in. For example, in terms of coding assistant, I want to do like type ahead, I want to like generate the code snippet and things like that. So that's something you will do by adding on top of that, and that's called as like fine tuning technique. You might have heard it. And with that technique, right, like there were army of these coding assistant has born. Remember last year 2023, so many coding assistant came into picture. This is not all. There are so many. I haven't listed them all here. Have you, Alec, are you using any coding assistant tool or any form of GenAI in your project? Almost everyone? Exactly, right? So these days, instead of going to Google, we usually keep like ChatGPT window open and we'll type our questions over there, and that has become the norm. With these specific fine-tuned coding assistant, right, these can be developed, like divided into multiple areas. Like for DevOps, you can have specific. For designers, you can have like specific. Being background of backend developer, I explored mostly around backend development, and I explored tools like Code Whisperer and Copilot, etc. Today, my demo would be based on Copilot tool. So let's talk about that. Okay, so the problem statement is very simple, and we're not going to do like entire problem statement together. I have taken some screenshots and snapshots of learnings that I want to share with you and tips and tricks. So we'll not be solving entire problem is not the intent, but looking at like how we can use it better is something we want to take away. So simple statement, right? Like simple problem statement. What user, we have account, user should be able to see his transaction summary, filter account, buy, withdraw and deposit, etc. How many of you here are familiar with TDD? I see 2, show of hands, 3. Okay. So TDD is where you write test first and then you write your code. Okay. With coding assistant coming into picture, which has capability to generate test as well, you might wonder that, oh, why would I want to write test before, right? You would want to write code first, the code first and test later. But I am of still fundamental thought that you should be writing test first. Why? Because it helps you. Anybody can tell me like why we should be writing test first? Any?
We want to assess what the function of our
Okay. So, we want to verify the behavior and we want to do it beforehand, so that it helps in like like is my design correct or not, and once you write the code it can give you feedback, right. So, to work on that problem statement, I just set up like Spring Boot project. Familiar with Spring Boot? Yeah. Okay. So, I will be using Spring Boot and Kotlin as a language demo purpose. And what I did was, there is nothing in the repo at the moment, right. It's blank, just source and test folder, that's it. Everyone with me so far? Okay. So, first thing I did was writing a test, and I started with account like integration level test, right. And I gave a prompt that, hey, can you, like I am not giving a prompt to write entire test for me. I wrote a test name, and test name I think you must know that goes as a prompt as well and has to be like clear, well defined as well. So, I said that, hey, set up mock MVC controller test with correct endpoint following REST convention, etc. It gave me suggestions. So, if you see the blue block, right, it has like mock MVC part, which is correct, which is nice. So, it included mock MVC in the imports and generated this snippet for me, which is good. But what it did was, it had a mockito statement in the assertion, like setup and the assertion as well. If you are familiar with integration test, would you add this, like mockito is something, would you add? Maybe not, right, because you will mock external dependencies only in integration test, right. For example, if I have a payment gateway, I will mock that because it is not in my control, right, but we will not do that. So, the point I want to make here is the co-pilot is always, AI assistant tool is always not correct, and if you are starting your journey, you need to iterate through multiple prompts to come up with proper result. So, first result is always not going to be correct. So, then what did I do next is I added service over there, right, and I added a service which is account repository. So, then it knows that I do not have to use mock for that, and I have to use account repository. So, what did I do here? I gave a context, right, specific context, and that is how it can give the result. Again, the verification result was not correct, you have to again iterate through it, right. The very first example I used was negative example, right, which means it did not give me result that I wanted, but that is what I wanted to show and tell you, that the assistants are not going to be right at first attempt, right. Treat their code as a first draft of the code, right. And the another thing I did in this step was I followed the baby step. Even though this is very like pattern established that you will write controller, repository, service and your domain layer, I did not give the entire prompt to generate everything, because how many of you have got large MR to review? If you have a review process established in your project, etc. It takes very like long time to go through that MR, isn't it? Because yeah, like you have to follow so much like context in your head, it gives you too much load to go through that review, right. So, you will use like small baby steps, that is lesson number third. Okay. So, now let us see next feature and capability of this tool, right. So, thing did I over here was I specified the file in context. I mentioned that take this file into context and help me debug this error that I got. So, remember account statement, we were there. So, we wrote an integration test that was successful, right. Like we wrote an integration test, but it gave me error as I ran the test, and why? This was the error, right. And the error is, if you see account type over here that I have used in this SQL file migration is present in the camel case, and your database needs it in the snake case, right. And that is what the suggestion given to me by the tool, and it was easy, right. So, you give the error and you give your files in context, so it helps you to debug it faster, right. So, that is another tips and tricks. So, use like you can specify the files in context as well. But again, it is not a debugger, right, it does not replace the debugger. Remember, all these tools have learned from the patterns, established pattern. What is definition of generative AI? It can generate data by learning from existing pattern, and then it generates the output based on that knowledge, right. So, it always uses the pattern. All right. So, the next one is, are you with me so far? Okay. Okay. So, then the next one is, I have written one builder, right, which is account test builder, and in our development process, writing clean code is good for writing source code as well as your test code as well, right. So, you will use this builder and write it, but I have to write the very similar one, so that you can find the similarities between this one, right, account test builder and transaction test builder, right. I gave a prompt that, hey, can you generate the builder? There is a transaction entity which already exists, and can you generate a builder for me which is similar to account test builder? And it could do, like it could generate that, and that's something we can do. So, if your context is there and if your context is good, you have established that practice in your project, you can take that to generate another snippet of the code, which is this builder, right. So, it's helpful in generating these builders as well. The next one is, we wrote, now our integration test that we wrote was happy like end to end, and we have to write next few set of tests, right. And as soon as you press enter, it gives you suggestion, because my already context was good, so it gave me good suggestion. Okay, given this is a kata and demo project, I would take this code as it is, but if this is a production code, right, I would want to add like specific error message in the assertion, so that if, let's say, any microservice is using, they can update it. So, the point here I want to mention is, you can accept suggestions as it is, but you might need to tweak a little bit to make it work. Okay, so the next one is interesting. There are so many tasks in our project, right, that we do like, for example, generating Swagger configuration. How many of you do it in the project? Maybe only once, right? Setting up Kafka container, you only do it once. You know it theoretically that this is how you want to do it, but you might not do it in a daily basis, and that's why you might not remember how to do it, right. For these kind of tasks, you can take help of these AI assistant tool, because I think the integration of Copilot is really good with the IDE. You don't have to leave your IDE, you can be just in the editor, and you can give a prompt that, hey, can you generate Swagger configuration for me? So, it generated like Swagger config file for me, it suggested which file I should be including as a dependency in Gradle, and yeah, similarly for test container as well, right. But other thing we need to be watchful here is, it cannot like, let's say it gives you some version, right, but you need to still check if that version is okay to use it in the production code, because it has learned it from some patterns, and it might be good for using it in the non-production code, but if, let's say, that version, particular library version, has some vulnerabilities, you might not want to use it, right. So, that check is something where we still need human developer. We cannot accept the suggestions for versioning as it is, because it won't check security vulnerability for you yet. There are talks which is happening in Copilot community, that they will do like live integration with web to detect these kind of things, but it is still in the progress. They have made some progress for TypeScript, but it is not there yet for Kotlin kind of things. So, they have done it in the, like, you can use dependabot automatically to fix your vulnerabilities, but again they say with a disclaimer that use it with your, like, it's still human developers responsibility to use it wisely. The next part is code smells, right. Lot of time in our project we have to do refactoring, right. This is very small example of the code smell. What I did was, I didn't add explicitly service, I just added everything in my controller code, and then I asked, hey, is there any code smell in this code snippet? Very short code snippet, not very large, and then it suggested that yes, you can write, like, this is a bad thing that you are doing, which is coupling the controller and service responsibility. You can rather create a service for that one. I asked the next prompt, hey, can I use case for this one? Because clean architecture, they suggest to use case as single of separation of concern is much better in that one. Then it says that yes, use that. So, but it didn't give me that suggestion on the first attempt, right? And I could, because I had a knowledge that hey, we need to use case, and that's why I asked that question. So, the point I want to emphasize over here is it doesn't replace your knowledge. You still need to learn as a human developer. You still need to understand what are the new emerging patterns, and is this something good for my project in this context. Okay, that's the end of the demo. Thank you for bearing with me till now. But okay, so what are the learnings that we learned from this demo, right? So you can use GitHub Copilot for small repetitive tasks. Keep your take baby steps always. Don't let it generate like large code, because instead of saving your time, you will spend maybe additional time reviewing the code, and you might not know that sometimes the bugs might get crept into the code, right? So you need to be still watchful about taking baby steps. We saw that tasks like for Swagger configuration, test containers, etc. Like we know how to do it in theory, but we don't do it daily. For these kind of things, we can use it. How many of you found yourself that you spent like half an hour and you still didn't get an answer from the tool? Most of you, right? So what you do at that time is you understand that take a control. First of all, don't use it for all the tasks. Sometimes doing it by yourself would be easier than relying on the tool to do everything for you. And of course, take baby steps. I'm highlighting it again. And what are the capabilities that we saw? There are different commands that you can use it in the chat. So there is inline chat. There is I can show quickly on the editor maybe. So this is where you can type, and it can say that hey, explain this code to me, or fix this particular test, or simplify a particular code for me. Similarly, if you can select the line, and you can use inline chat over here and ask that hey, why this is giving me compilation error, if let's say it is giving you compilation error for particular reason. So these are some capabilities of this tool, right? And there are other tools in these area as well. So there are some capabilities, and we saw that there is nice integration, right? So you can use inline chat, you can use the chat other on the specific window as well. And again, treat your code as first draft of your code, right? And it is good for repetitive kind of tasks. That's something we have seen. So we gave like one test builder, the pattern was good, established, it can generate another pattern out of it. Like Swagger configuration. And okay, the point I want to talk about is it is trained at specific time, right? These tools which you see in the market, right? Today they release GPT-4, tomorrow they might release something else. So they are trained at specific time. So let's say you are using some library which came later point in time. For example, I'll use the timeline. So your tool gets released in June, but your tool was trained in March. It wouldn't have knowledge of new version and new capabilities. So then, so you need to remember that it is not up to date and live. Okay, what it is not, right? What Copilot is not? It is not even though we have used it, like we gave specific error message and it showed us that hey, this was the result, like this was the reason make my account type to snake case instead of using camel case. But it is not a debugger, it is not a compiler, it doesn't replace that yet. It is just helping you to come up in give you response in a natural language, but it is not a debugger or a compiler. Similarly, it is not security auditor, because it does not have that capability to go and fetch and see what are the CVEs against that particular library and tell you that hey, this is the error in your project. So it is not that. And we just talked about it that it is trained at specific point in time. And interesting thing is it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't work, right? And it hallucinates as well. I will take example of ChatGPT. I was using it to come up with some Corologics query for my project. And it gave me suggestion, and I was like, oh nice, it could give suggestion. And I used it, but it didn't work because the suggestion it gave was in the Splunk query. Because Splunk and Corologics are sister, yeah, or brother, whatever. But they gave suggestions like, and it didn't work, which means it cannot, like it made a prediction that given these two are similar, they can generate data. Like I can give you suggestion for that query and it should work for this one, but it didn't. So what you need to do at that point, just stop, go learn the documentation and from that use it, right. So don't waste your time when it doesn't work thinking that, oh, if I give the prompt next time it might work, etc. So sometimes you need to understand that a tool might not have all capabilities because it has maybe not trained with that data for that particular version of Corologics. There are a lot of claims about these tools, isn't it? That hey, this tool can generate the entire project for you. This project, it can generate entire like service controller, etc. for you. But these days, problems are not simple. Problems are wicked problems, right? And what are these? These are not simple. Multiple stakeholders are involved. Yeah, and then every other, they are not simple or easy to understand, right? And what you need to do is, you need to like do a trade-off. You need to understand the complex requirement, break down into smaller requirements. Yes, when you can break down into smaller requirements, then you can feed that to the AI assistant tool to generate like small like snippet, but it cannot generate the entire project or entire thing for you yet. And we are living also in the microservices world where so many repositories are present across the organization. It cannot tell you that, hey, this responsibility you need to put it in this repository, because it has a context, but it cannot have that context of which repository I should use it. And the most important thing is strategic direction. However you feed this model, however you make your model like generic purpose, you cannot give the strategic direction as you want to be to the model to the fullest, right. So still the point I want to highlight here is, still you need a human developer to take decision on top of what these AI assistant tools suggest you. And how is the code quality generated by these tools, right? What is quality, like what is code quality? Like what do you consider as code quality? Readable, yeah, that's true. Huh?
Maintainable.
Readable and maintainable, spot on. I think you're really good, yeah. Like, okay, so code quality is, yes, it has to be readable, easy to read, easy to maintain, and why? Because we can add additional feature on top of that easily, and everyone wants to go faster, right? Your project manager will come and tell you, hey, can you build this in 2 days, etc. But if your code is not clean, you won't be able to do it. It's just not about source code, it's about test code as well. If your tests are brittle, they are non-deterministic, flaky, it won't work for you. Like you wouldn't be able to develop it faster as you want to be, right? So code quality is both source code as well as test code as well. You might say that, hey, this code works, is it clean code? Maybe not, because under the hood it just works, right? But it might not be easy to add features on top of that, isn't it? So always working thing might not be equal to clean. Same goes with AI tools as well. The snippet it generates, it might be working, but it is trained on production as well as non-production data, right? For example, the demo I just showed, I put it on the GitHub. Someday the tool is going to read my repository and learn from that one and give suggestion to someone because it has learned it from that domain, for banking domain. But my project is just a kata, right? It's a non-production code. So even if it generates, it is not, the code might not be production ready, right? Because it learned from everywhere. The other thing is, these tools cannot understand and differentiate between good versus bad. So what we did before, because I gave account entity test builder to build similar like as a transaction test builder, my existing context was good, it wasn't bad, it wasn't poised. So it could generate good code. But imagine it was a bad code, it would have generated bad code because it's a tool, right? It might think that, oh, this is how you want to generate it. So if your existing code is not good, it might not generate good code for you. So the point here is you still need to follow all those clean code practices, and you need human loop to be over there. And again, they are not aware of, like the tech debt you have incurred across like over the period of time, and in which strategic direction you are heading towards. Let's say after 3 months I want to delete, like write some solution, but I don't want to use it after 3 months. It's something only you are aware, and maybe you might not want to spend, like make it more shiny and good, all that, because you know that you're gonna get rid of that code. So it's okay to carry that tech debt, but let's say some piece of code which will carry a value in future as well, you will spend time cleaning it up. So it's something, the trade-off decision again, the tool cannot do for you. Okay, again, there are claims that using these tools, you can increase your code throughput. You do that, okay? But what happens to the left side of the project and the right side of the project? If you don't have CI/CD established, which is continuous, like your review process is not sorted, the moment you added this tool, because there are no quality gates, so many bugs started coming up, right? And you don't have a process of fix, like good quality gets established in your integration process, then even though there is an increase in the throughput, it might not help you. And similarly, if your requirements are not clear, it won't help you as well going faster. So what I want to emphasize here is all engineering practices still matter. I would say they matter more in this time. Okay, this is, these are some sensible default practices we follow in Thoughtworks. If you haven't heard of them, all these practices lead to 3 things: feedback, repeatability and simplicity. So if I take example of TDD, right, it gives you fast feedback because my test turns red to green. It gave me feedback that my test is passing. It is simple to write, and because I'm going to use it like again and again, I would write maybe pre-push hook for it in the project. I will have quality gets set up in the project, like my CI/CD in the build to production and continuous deployment path. So all these practices lead to these 3 things. So you might say that what happens to the practices if we start using AI tools? Should we still use these or should we not? Okay, I would say quality is something which matters more. People are using this tool to write test later. That's something I don't agree. I would still like prefer to write test before I write production code. But fine, like you got like legacy project where you want to develop features on that and there are no tests. You want to lock the behavior. Yes, I can use the tool wonderfully to generate like characterization tests for me, which will lock the behavior, and then it will be easy for me to understand if there are any failures, right? So quality is something matters even more. And as we saw, like if your throughput gets increased, our right side also we need to make it like very strong, which means all the practices that leads to continuous integration is still crucial. So you need to have like quality gets in place, you need to have deployment pipelines, you need to build for production. Now these are some of the AI smells related to something similar to code smell, but these are related to like people behavioral characteristic. Context poisoning is something we already saw, right? Context poisoning is because the tool cannot understand and differentiate from like good versus bad. If your context is bad, it might generate bad code for you. So that's what context poisoning is. There is automation bias. This is like a person always thinks that the code which is generated by AI is always correct. And the next thing is, and this is happening with the recent developer who haven't seen the code other than generated by tools. So they believe that everything generated by the tool has to be correct. And why? Because they haven't seen any other alternative implementation, etc. The next one is because you go into thought process of, hey, everything like it generated this for me, it generated that for me, then you go into the mode of alt enter, right? You go into the steroids and you accept everything which is given by the tool. And the last one is very dangerous. when a person goes into a mode of, they feel very hesitant to delete the code which is generated by these tools. Now you might think like how you would, like have you faced these, like when you are using tool, have you fallen into one of these category? Personally I have, and I have to like think again that how can I avoid that, right? So some of the things I think you need to keep in mind that it is not always correct, that's something there. There are another claims, right, that your these tools is your like pair, it is your like a co-pilot is my, like a new pair, you don't need maybe a human being for it. But we saw in the morning, right, when we selected that pairing tick, it give you productivity boost. It's something similar with these tools as well. These tools are just there, but they don't replace a human pair, right? So if you're stuck, if you're not able to solve anything, call for a human help, right? Remember Ankit's talk in the morning, like he checked the box and then your productivity goes faster. So it's similar with the tool, right? So tool doesn't replace, the tool doesn't replace a human pair. A human pair will help you to get project context. It will also help you to bring your focus back, and also the other practices, right, that we get to, like all our soft skills that we get to practice with, that we get to use with only human person, like empathy and all that, that's something tool cannot give you. So pairing is still helpful with this one, right, like it's just a tool that is helping you to amplify. And what about the productivity? Even though my talk claims that I will be talking about, hey, how to increase your productivity, but not, it's a trap. It doesn't, anything you add, right? How can you add just one tool and you expect your tool to increase your productivity by 52%, because that has been the claim by these AI assistant tool. It simply cannot, because we saw in the morning that the productivity is not just single aspect, right? There are so many aspects got involved with productivity. If your existing code is clean, you might be productive. If your requirements are clear and code clean and you have good all engineering practices set up, you will be able to develop faster, right? So it's not just one factor, it's all that relates, gives you productivity boost, right? So all the claims that are in the market that hey, use this tool and you get 52% boost, maybe not. You need to establish all practices, and then yes, the tool can help you to amplify your coding throughput, right? This is like how you can measure the engineering effectiveness, right? And I think I don't need to summarize it again, we saw it in the morning. There is another one which is by Pat Kua. It's something I like, that you track your matrices to goals, measure those for a small time, and if something doesn't work, change your metrics, right? And measure always the outcomes over the outputs, don't measure like absolute numbers. Yeah, so all the claims related to this tool will give you boost are, I would say, not correct. I do not agree with those. You might think like how to use this, like how to think about ROI for this kind of tools. First, I think we need to adopt it in the team. The team has to have a right knowledge of how to use it, where it doesn't work, where it works. So maybe conduct a lot of trainings so that people understand like how to use that tool effectively. And then you understand, like collect the, we saw that developer experience is one of the like crucial part of productivity, right? And so what we, after adopting it, we can see that if the team is using it or not, and we can collect it via surveys. We can ask questions, and of course we need to manage our own risk, right? We need to see that my static code analysis checks are in place. If I started using tool, has my bug count gone increasing, then maybe then your quality gates are not strong. If you are using tool to write tests, then maybe you are not like the team is not using it in the correct way. So you need to manage the risk part as well. So this is one of the survey happened in Thoughtworks on 50 projects across the globe, where people are using Copilot. the survey was taken with different experience level, not just for junior developer and senior level as well. And interestingly, I think senior developer would use it differently, right, and the junior would use it differently, that's there. But then how you can, like there is no substitute for the learning. So junior developer still have to learn all the practices by going through books, going through courses, etc. so that they have a power and they have a understanding of what is good and what is bad. That's something senior developer would have it already over the years. Okay, so in general, I think the tool survey said was it allowed them to work faster, it was useful for them, and they would recommend it to team. And this was interesting where like is it more distracting than useful, and people said that no, it is not distracting, it was useful. But I think given that they knew it, how to use it properly, they didn't use it for of course all the tasks. So there were specific trainings conducted for those teams as well. All right, that comes to like our end of the talk, and these are takeaways for today. So these tool assist you, but they like it's human developer responsibility to use them wisely. All engineering practices still matters more, and tool cannot differentiate between good versus bad. So it's human's responsibility to understand, and it doesn't substitute the learning of the developer. And remember, AI smells. Your AI assistant tool is not equal to human pair. So yeah, it doesn't replace human person. And take baby steps, because if it generates large code, you might not know where you might find a bug, and treat your code which is generated by this tool as a first draft and not as a final. Yeah, so these are takeaways. Any questions?
The copilot send your code back to the server, or is it
Ah, okay. So how about the privacy of my code and all that thing, right? So there are different license, like you can take the license for your organization, and once you take that, the data wouldn't be sent back to the server. So there are some, yeah, you can use it in a, like you can choose your license properly so that it works for your organization and for your project better. Yeah, but if you take it for personal use, yes, it doesn't guarantee that. All right, thank you then, that's all.